Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how to paint watercolor Narcissus. Narcissus is one of the birth month flowers for the month of December, and I cannot wait to show you how to paint this beautiful flower. For this project you will need watercolor paper. I'm using Arches 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. I also have a set of round brushes here, but I'm only using my size 4 round brush today, and I have my limited palette of colors. This is cad yellow, magenta, cerulean, indigo, and sap green. So let's get started. Like I said, I'm only using my size 4 round brush today, and I like to start with the centers of the Narcissus because it's easier to know where the petals are going to be when you start with the centers. So I'm starting with some pure yellow, maybe adding a bit of magenta into it here and there to make sure it is a warm yellow but not too orange. Narcissus are on the small side. Think a smaller daffodil type look. So we're going to paint these smaller centers, again classic trumpet like a daffodil, but the one on the top we're seeing from the front, and so it's a simple circle. I leave a little bit of white space just to give some breathing room to the paint, and then the one on the right and the left we're seeing from the side. So it's a longer oval for the base middle of the trumpet, and then a wiggly line for the ruffly edge of the trumpet. Now we're going to paint the white petals, and this can be really tricky because we're not using white paint. So what we need to use is a variety of different colors to give us a white hue at the end. So this is a mixture of some of the colors I already had on my palette, which is one of the keys I think to using color to paint white petals. So grab some of your blues. This is a cerulean indigo mixture. Add a bit of magenta, maybe a little bit of green, but the key is to use a lot of water so that the value of these petals is very light and it ends up looking like a white petal and not a blue, purple, or green petal. Now this flower here at the top, we're seeing all of the petals very perfectly nice and centered around this circular center, and then the ones on the right and the left, we're only seeing some of the petals. So as it comes around to the side, the petals are disappearing, and so they get a little bit thinner as well. I also like that some of my center color is blending into the petals just a bit. I think that's a cool effect when they touch and a little bit of the yellow bleeds in. As your petals begin to dry, you can add another wash on top for texture, details, dimension, shadow. So think same colors, the deeper indigo, purpley blues, still light, and a little bit goes a very long way. Just pick a few petals to add this wash to, and we'll come back to this. We just don't want our white petals to look flat. Now I am adding some of my sap green to my palette, but what I'm mixing up here is brown. One of my favorite ways to mix brown is using magenta, any of my blues, cerulean, indigo, and then adding a bit of green, maybe even yellow. It just depends on the color of brown that you're looking for. Now with Narcissus, they kind of have this brown bit that is really rough and scraggly before it gets to the green. So I'm attaching that to each of my flowers, and then I'm going straight into my green so that this color kind of blends together. So dipping into the sap green, tapping it into where my brown is, and then bringing the stem down. As I'm bringing the stem down, I'm realizing it's such an intense green that I dip straight into my yellow and lighten it up as I get down toward the bottom of the stem. So that worked out for me. Sometimes I am mixing those colors and making those changes right on the paper, and that works out. So I am attaching this greenery to each of the brown bits, dragging that down to the bottom of the paper, and now I'm painting the leaves. So one thing I love about these leaves is they are long, straight, very similar to like a daffodil leaf, but the tips are a lot more rounded, and that works really nicely when you're using a size 4 round brush. It's almost exactly the shape of the tip of my brush. So I can drag that down, and because my size 4 round brush doesn't hold a lot of water and pigment, I am picking up some of that green quite frequently, but it just makes the perfect leaf shape for the Narcissus. Now for the shadows of the greenery, I'm not mixing another color into it. I'm just using my sap green in a higher concentration. So I'm adding this deeper green on the leaf that's kind of underneath that narcissus to the left. I'm also differentiating between those leaves that are together on the left. I'm adding little bits of grasses or scraggly bits down at the bottom, some texture on the stems, anywhere where it feels like there needs to be shadow or dimension. You just don't want to lose completely your lighter or medium value colors underneath. A little bit goes a long way when you're adding the contrasting shadowy parts. Now you might have noticed I have this little stem over here on the right. This is for a bud. So I've picked up some of that lighter bluish gray color and added a few strokes to represent this small bud here on the right. Now we're going to let that dry before we add more details to all of our petals, but I want to paint the ring around the trumpet next. I want to get a really nice punchy red for this edge of the trumpet, so I'm mixing together magenta and yellow, and I would definitely lean more magenta. For the ones on the right side and the left side, I am doing a very ruffly edge, and then this one in the center, I'm doing a circle, but it is not perfect and it is a little bit disconnected with the lines. Then I go back into my browns on my palette and I mix together a light brown because we can see inside the center of this top narcissus, and I do a few dots to represent the stamen and the filaments inside. I'm dipping straight into my cad yellow and adding this color at the base of the trumpets to give it a little bit more dimension. Now I'm going to mix up an even darker brown to also add shadow and dimension to the brown bits at the base of the flowers. So going back into my magenta, mixing it with yellow, adding some blues, adding some greens, you want a darker version of this brown. Once again, anytime we add contrast or shadow, a little bit goes a long way, so I am very carefully adding this to the brown bits, but it is definitely subtle. Then I thought the edges of my trumpets that I painted red were a little bit dull, so I just dipped straight into my magenta and technically added a glaze over the top of them, and this really helped to bring the brightness and make it look even more red. And now that everything's dry, we can add more details and dimension in our petals using more of those lighter blue-gray washes, and you can see where it needs it. Now that we have so much contrast in the rest of the painting, a little bit goes a long way because we just want to add details and not make it look like the petals are blue. And that is our narcissus finished. At the bottom, I'm writing December and Narcissus because I am doing this painting as part of a birth month flower project, but there is never a wrong time to paint narcissus. I hope you enjoyed this painting. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.